Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Cogent Canine here, and today we are looking at Stefan Molyneux again. Who else, right? This guy needs to be taken down a peg constantly, and I guess I'm here to do that. So let's get into the video description of this video we're looking at. The fierce debate between free market capitalism and Marxism has raged on for decades and escalated to war and near endless violence. Stefan Molyneux is joined by Lauren Southern's evil twin for a mock debate about the essential ideological conflict between freedom and central planning. So in essence, Lauren Southern goes on his show to let him win the debate that they're having, this mock debate. But even with all these softball questions that Stefan is being thrown, he can't hit a single one of them. You would think with Lauren Southern playing along, trying to get him to win the debate, he wouldn't look so foolish constantly when he's trying to answer these questions she's asking. But over and over and over again, he falls into the same tactics that he uses on people that call into his show. And the irony is that he wrote a book called The Art of the Argument. And Stefan Molyneux is notorious for not actually dealing with arguments. He is notorious for just berating the people that call into his show and using fallacy after fallacy to try to prove his point. I mean, the guy's an anarcho-capitalist, so there's not much defending to be had there. And even with Lauren Southern playing a crazy Marxist, he still can't manage to put together coherent arguments. So what I've done is I just rifled through the video to try to find the best example of this, and I think I have a good one for you guys. It's a simple question that an anarcho-capitalist should be able to answer, and they should have thought about it 1,000 times. It should be easy. It should be right on the tip of his tongue. But with Stefan, nothing's ever that easy. He has to go in a complete roundabout way to try to even answer a yes or no question. So with the introduction out of the way, let's get into the video and see what Stefan has to say.
Should you be able to sell heroin to a 5-year-old? Let's go to that one. Total free market. Should I be allowed to sell heroin to a 5-year-old?
Well, the simple answer to that is absolutely not. You should definitely not be able to sell heroin to a 5-year-old. See how easy that was?
I can't imagine a situation wherein a parent would allow a 5-year-old to have the money to buy heroin, or that a 5-year-old would know what heroin is or how to get it or what to do with it. So I can't imagine such a situation.
Well, I just don't think you're trying hard enough and you don't have much of an imagination. Plus, you didn't answer the question. You went immediately into your diversion tactics and didn't answer it. But I could definitely conceive of a situation where in an anarcho-capitalist society, people would be selling drugs to children. People sell drugs to children right now and it's illegal. So take away that, do you think people are going to sell less to kids or more to kids? Well, call me crazy, but I think if you take away the law, people are definitely going to be selling more drugs to children.
You may not be able to imagine it, but I sure as hell know when I was in high school, drug dealers came to our school and kids had money and jobs. I had a job at 13. I could buy drugs when I was 13 if I wanted to.
And in the 19th century, you could buy cocaine when you were a 6-year-old.
Yeah, that's great, Stefan, but is it a good idea? Was it a good idea that they could buy cocaine at 6 years old? And also, you're still not answering the question. You are still bringing up other things as a diversion tactic, also called a red herring. You're not dealing with the question. But this is common for Stefan. He does this all the time. And the audacity he has to write a book called The Art of the Argument when he never actually deals with people's arguments. He constantly tries to find a roundabout way to look like he has won the debate without actually ever dealing with the person's argument. So what the fuck is your point, Stefan? That it was bad back then or that it was good back then? What is the point of you diverting from the original question to talk about this? What's the point? Oh yeah, the point is to try to get away from just saying yes. We should be able to sell heroin to a 5-year-old, because if you just came out and said that, well, then you kind of look like a shitty, horrible person that doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. So you're not going to do that. You're going to do this.
Do you know how? in Coca-Cola. One of the first ingredients in Coca-Cola was cocaine. And you could
Isn't
buy
capitalism
heroin, even in the post-Second World War period, you could get them like 3 for a quarter in London. Pharmacies and so on. So there has been times in the past where this stuff is widely available and is not particularly restricted. And you know what there wasn't? There wasn't a big giant opioid crisis.
Well, I guess that would depend on how you define crisis, Stefan. But opiates have always been a problem, ever since they were introduced. So to pretend like these drugs weren't a problem when they were sold legally over the counter is completely dishonest. During the Civil War, morphine was used on the battlefield for soldiers, and after the war, lots of soldiers got addicted to morphine. They actually called it the soldier's disease. Then in 1898, heroin was introduced as an over-the-counter prescription for many ailments, and it was claimed by doctors to be non-addictive. Well, this just wasn't true, and by 1914, 200,000 people were addicted to heroin in New York City alone. And in 1924, the deputy commissioner of the New York police reported that 94% of all crimes were being committed by heroin addicts. So for Stefan to claim that these drugs weren't a problem back when they were sold over the counter legally, and to further claim that opiates would be less of a problem if they were legal, is asinine. But Stefan is forced into this corner. He is forced to say that without the government, drugs wouldn't be a problem. Because if he doesn't, then it just looks bad for his stupid little anarcho-capitalist society.
There wasn't a big giant
yes?
set of drug addictions. There weren't ever escalating deaths from opioid addictions. That comes from the government funding healthcare. That comes from the government paying for all of these drugs. That comes from and general despair of people living in a dying society. But yeah, there have been times in the past where kids could go into drugstores and buy stuff. And you know what? They didn't.
And that should be allowed.
And there was not much of a problem at all.
And that is Stefan Molyneux's answer for everything. The free market will work it out. People would understand that it is bad to sell heroin to a 5-year-old, and any business that did would be boycotted, and no one would shop there anymore. For some reason, I don't think this would be the case. For some reason, I think businesses' doors would stay open regardless of who they were selling these drugs to.
Yes or no? You should be allowed to sell heroin to 5-year-olds. Yes or no?
Compared to what?
What do you mean compared to what? It's a yes or no
there's no
question.
magic switch. There's no magic switch that you can just pull and say, now a magic force field goes up for every conceivable interaction involving things. If I ran a pharmacy, I would never sell heroin to a 5-year-old. And I would never, ever, ever go to any pharmacy that did that. And I think that's how things would be dealt with.
The same thing could literally be said about murder or rape. Compared to what, Lauren? People shouldn't be allowed to rape people. People shouldn't be allowed to murder people. But compared to what? Compared to the evil government? Stefan knows if he concedes that we shouldn't be selling heroin to 5-year-olds, then he's also conceding that force is necessary. And in order to prevent people from selling heroin to 5-year-olds, we would need to have consequences for them. But given how he's a follower of the NAP, the non-aggression principle, no force is ever necessary. Even when it comes to enforcing consequences for murder, consequences for rape, consequences for selling heroin to a 5-year-old. He knows if he answers this question with a no, he's also saying that we would need a government to enforce it. But he's not about to say that. He would never say that sometimes we need to force people to do things. Sometimes we need to have consequences for people's actions. And the only way that we can do that in a way that would actually work and be the best for everyone is with a centralized government, a power structure that works for the people to protect the people from the bad people. And without this power structure, anybody could do anything, and that includes selling heroin to anybody of any age. But because taxation is theft, and force is the most evil thing in the world, according to Stefan, he would rather live in an anarcho-capitalist society where violence would reign supreme and the most powerful would prevail.
But compared to what is important, Lauren, because if you say, well, should 5-year-olds be allowed to buy heroin? And you say, well, no. Well, that's not magic. What happens then is you have to create a big giant government with a massive tax apparatus and usually it ends up in fiat currency. It ends up in foreign wars and so on. It's like, I'll take the risk. I'll take the risk. Because I know where the other thing leads to. Just look at America. Oh, they got a big war on drugs, and it's horrendous. The number of people who are being chewed up through the prison industrial complex and the amount of organized crime that is destroying American societies and so on. And that all comes out of, originally, it was just trying to keep drugs out of the hands of wrong people. So compared to what? There's no magic force field that just suddenly emerges when you want something to happen in society. You have to create a tiny monopoly of people who have all the power in the known universe to impose their coercive will upon you, and then you have to cross your fingers and hope that for once in human history, power doesn't corrupt. But guess what? It always does. And that's what I mean when I say compared to what? Compared to a big, giant, imperialistic slave apparatus that sells children into intergenerational slavery. It's like, compared to what?
I find it so strange when he talks about power, and he talks about a monopoly of power, but he's talking about the U.S. government. He's talking about it like it's a dictatorship and not a democracy. When he's talking about power and how it corrupts, he seems to be talking about his society. But when you flip it on him and you ask him, would any of these private businesses in your society be corrupted? Would any of those businesses form a monopoly? He declares no, it's impossible because people are supremely ethical and they would boycott any business that acted unethically. Never mind, that is the process we tried to set up with the government. Instead of having people get on Yelp and bitch and complain, we can actually do something about it. We actually have the power structure to vote and accomplish things based on that power structure. Instead of just hoping for the best. Instead of just hoping people don't sell heroin to 5-year-olds. Instead of declaring that you would never sell heroin to a 5-year-old, and I would never shop at a place that did. You see, the government can ensure that, and your society, given that it's voluntary, can ensure nothing. And the non-aggression principle is going to get you nowhere if you don't have consequences for breaking it.
So your answer is yes to that.
And that's where their discussion ends on that topic. But he never actually says, yes, we should be able to sell heroin to a 5-year-old. He just implies it for about 5 minutes, going on about how evil the government is. I sure hope these debate tactics aren't in his new book, because he actually never dealt with the question. He completely beat around the bush, and then at the end, somewhat said, yes, we should be able to because the government is evil, but never actually says it, because if he says it, he looks like a jackass. But him doing this, and him trying to obscure the question into oblivion, doesn't make him look any better. Well, that brings us to the end of the video, and thank you for watching if you made it to the end. And a few things here at the end I wanted to say. I have a Twitter, I have a Facebook, and I have a Patreon. Any donations on my Patreon would be greatly appreciated, and it would allow me to do more commentaries on a more regular basis. So links will be in the description for that, and I hope you all have a good day. Bye-bye for now.